Tonight, we're going to break something beautiful. The words sliced through the parking lot darkness like a blade, followed by the thunderous roar of 3 Harley-Davidson engines, cutting through the midnight silence. Viper's voice carried the kind of cold certainty that made even hardened criminals step aside. His leather-gloved hands gripped the handlebars as he surveyed the dimly lit establishment ahead. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting blood-red shadows across the cracked asphalt, and I know exactly where to start. Inside Murphy's bar, Riley Matthews moved with mechanical precision behind the worn mahogany counter. Each motion deliberate, each placement exact. Her hands worked without conscious thought, muscle memory guiding every action as she arranged glasses in perfect rows. The repetitive task provided a strange comfort, a rhythm that kept darker thoughts at bay. She had learned long ago that idle hands led to idle minds, and idle minds wandered to places she preferred to keep locked away. The establishment held perhaps a dozen patrons scattered across mismatched tables and bar stools that had seen better decades. Smoke hung in lazy spirals beneath dime yellow lights, creating an atmosphere that was neither welcoming nor hostile, simply existing in that liminal space where people came to forget. Riley wiped down the same section of bar for the 3rd time, her movements betraying none of the hypervigilance that kept her positioned with perfect sightlines to both entrances, and her back protected by the mirror-lined wall. Her reflection caught her attention briefly. 28 years old, auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing a simple black t-shirt that concealed more than it revealed. To any casual observer, she appeared to be exactly what she claimed to be, nothing more than another late-shift bartender earning a living in a forgotten corner of the city. The carefully maintained facade had served her well for the past 2 years since her discharge from active duty. That distinctive rumble outside grew louder, accompanied by the screech of brakes and the sharp crack of kickstands hitting pavement. Riley's hands stilled on the glass she had been polishing, her posture shifting almost imperceptibly. Years of training had taught her to recognize the difference between ordinary late-night arrivals and something more dangerous. The aggressive revving, the deliberate noise meant to announce their presence, the way the engines died in synchronized precision, all spoke to coordination and intent. 3 figures emerged from the mechanical beasts outside, their silhouettes clearly visible through the dirt-streaked windows. Even at distance, Riley could assess their threat level with the cold efficiency of someone who'd made such calculations under fire. The leader stood tallest, broad shoulders, straining against a leather jacket adorned with patches that told stories of violence and territory. His companions flanked him with the practiced ease of predators who had worked together before. If you're already feeling the tension building, hit that like button and subscribe because this night is about to get a whole lot more dangerous. The heavy oak door swung open with enough force to rattle the adjacent windows, announcing their arrival like a war drum. Viper stepped across the threshold first, his presence immediately commanding the attention of every soul in the establishment. 6'4" in of concentrated menace, he surveyed the room with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to taking whatever he wanted. His beard streaked with premature gray, framed a face that had seen too many fights and enjoyed most of them. Knox followed close behind, already reaching for the phone clipped to his vest. At 25 Zerkiel and Chua Sasfues, he served as the group's digital chronicler, documenting their exploits for an online audience that thrived on vicarious violence. His thumbs worked across the screen with practiced efficiency, live streaming their entrance to followers who had come to expect increasingly extreme content. The notification sound of viewers joining the stream created a soft, electronic symphony beneath the bar's ambient noise. Diesel brought up the rear, rolling his shoulders like a boxer preparing for a bout. Shorter than his companions, but built like a concrete block, he possessed the kind of hair-trigger aggression that made smart people cross the street when they saw him coming. His eyes swept the room with obvious disappointment at the sparse crowd, clearly hoping for a larger audience to witness whatever entertainment they had planned. Riley continued her methodical cleaning, giving no outward sign that she had registered their arrival beyond the slight adjustment in her stance that positioned her weight on the balls of her feet. The casual observer might mistake her continued focus on her work as either bravery or stupidity. Those with more experience in violence would recognize it as the calm that preceded action, the stillness of a coiled spring waiting for the proper moment to release. The trio approached the bar with the swagger of men who had never encountered meaningful resistance. Their boots struck the hardwood floor in irregular rhythms, each step an assertion of dominance over territory they considered theirs by right of might. Conversations throughout the establishment died natural deaths as patrons recognized the shifting atmosphere, some sliding quietly toward exits while others hunched deeper into their drinks. Whiskey, Viper announced, his voice carrying the expectation of immediate compliance. He settled onto a bar stool that creaked ominously under his weight, planting his elbows on the scarred surface with the territorial authority of someone marking their domain. His eyes never left Riley's face, studying her reaction with the focused intensity of a predator evaluating prey. Riley reached for the bottle of house whiskey, her movements maintaining the same unhurried precision that had characterized her work throughout the evening. She selected a clean glass from the overhead rack, noting automatically how the weight distribution would change if she needed to use it as a projectile. The amber liquid caught the overhead light as Shepard 2 fingers worth, the sound of glass meeting wood marking another point in an escalating timeline. "Enjoy your drink, sir," she offered, her tone professional but not servile. The words carried just enough distance to establish boundaries without crossing into open hostility. Years of dealing with difficult personalities in high-stress environments had taught her the value of measured responses, of giving potential threats room to de-escalate while maintaining her own position. Viper's hand lingered as he reached for the glass, his fingers deliberately brushing against hers with the casual entitlement of someone accustomed to taking liberties. Riley withdrew her hand with the same controlled precision she applied to everything else, neither rushing the movement nor allowing it to linger. The gesture appeared natural, unremarkable, but conveyed unmistakable boundaries to anyone paying attention. Knox had positioned himself at an angle that captured both Riley and Viper in his phone's frame, the device's screen displaying a growing count of viewers drawn by promises of hunting season and breaking in the new girl. Comments scrolled past faster than casual reading could follow. Anonymous voices calling for escalation, violence, humiliation. The digital audience's bloodlust fed the physical presence of the three men, amplifying their natural aggression with the performance pressure of an online stage. "My boys here are thirsty too," Viper continued, gesturing toward his companions with a proprietary air that suggested Riley should feel honored by their attention. "Figured we might start a tab, maybe work out some kind of special arrangement for regular customers." The words carried layers of implication that hung in the air like smoke from a poorly ventilated fire. Riley's expression remained neutral, as she placed 2 additional glasses on the bar surface, her movements creating a subtle barrier between herself and the 3 men. To the untrained eye, her actions appeared to be nothing more than efficient service. Someone with combat experience might notice how she positioned the salt shaker within easy reach of her dominant hand, how the bottle opener found itself at precisely the right angle for improvised weaponry. "House policy requires payment upon service," Riley replied, her voice maintaining the same professional distance. She had learned to recognize the difference between customers seeking service and predators testing boundaries. The distinction usually revealed itself within the first few exchanges in the space between reasonable requests and entitled demands. Diesel laughed, the sound lacking any genuine humor. "House policy," he repeated, as if the words themselves were amusing. "You hear that, Knox? Little lady here thinks she makes the rules." His hand moved to the brass knuckles hanging from his belt. Not quite a threat, but certainly not subtle. The gesture was practiced, designed to intimidate without crossing the legal threshold that might bring unwanted law enforcement attention. Riley's gaze tracked the movement with the automatic precision of someone trained to catalog potential weapons, but her expression never changed. She had faced worse threats in environments where backup was measured in hours rather than minutes, where the stakes involved more than hurt feelings and bruised egos. The brass knuckles represented amateur intimidation to someone who had dealt with actual professionals. Knox adjusted his angle to capture Riley's reaction, or lack thereof, to his companion's implied threat. The phone's microphone picked up every word, transmitting the confrontation to an audience that fed one escalating conflict. Comments encouraged more aggressive behavior, virtual voice calling for action that their owners would never risk in person. The disconnect between digital bravado and physical cowardice was lost on men who'd never distinguished between the two. "Tell you what," Viper said, leaning forward across the bar, until his face was mere inches from Riley's. His breath carried the bitter smell of cheap alcohol and cigarettes mixed with something else she couldn't immediately identify. "Why don't we skip the money conversation and talk about other ways you might show your appreciation for our business?" The suggestion hung between them like a loaded weapon, its implications clear to everyone within earshot. Several of the remaining patrons found sudden reasons to leave, Sabri and their chairs scraping against the floor as they made hasty exits. The exodus left behind only those too drunk to recognize danger or too curious to abandon their front row seats to whatever was about to unfold. Riley reached beneath the bar, her movement deliberate enough to suggest she might be retrieving a weapon. Instead, her hand emerged with a damp towel, which she used to wipe down the already clean surface in front of Viper. The anticlimactic gesture somehow made the tension worse, the absence of fear or submission clearly unsettling to men accustomed to both reactions. "I think there might be some confusion about what kind of establishment this is," Riley said, her voice carrying a hint of something that might have been amusement. "We serve drinks. We take payment, we close at 2 a.m. Everything else is outside our scope of service." Their response was too controlled, too professional for someone supposedly intimidated by 3 violent men in an isolated location. Viper's eyes narrowed as he began to reassess his initial evaluation of the situation. Something about her posture, her breathing, the way she maintained perfect situational awareness while appearing to focus on her work, suggested training that went beyond mixing cocktails and handling drunks. Knox noticed it too, his commentary shifting as he narrated for his online audience. "Something's different about this one," He murmured into the phone's microphone. "She's not reacting right. Too calm. Too ready." The observation earned a flood of responses from viewers demanding escalation, violence, the kind of content that drove engagement metrics and subscriber counts. Diesel pushed back from the bar, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Maybe we need to help her understand the situation better," he suggested, cracking his knuckles with deliberate slowness. The sound echoed in the relative silence of the nearly empty establishment, punctuating his words with the promise of violence. Riley's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward the salt shaker, her fingers positioning themselves with the casual precision of someone adjusting a tool rather than preparing a weapon. The movement was so subtle that only someone trained to notice such details would register its significance. She had learned long ago that the most effective weapons were often the ones that appeared completely harmless, until the moment they weren't. The front door chimed softly as another patron entered. An older man wearing a worn veteran's cap and moving with the careful gait of someone whose joints had seen better decades. His appearance broke the escalating tension like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that spread outward in all directions. Knox immediately turned his phone toward the newcomer, recognizing potential complications to their evening's entertainment. "Evening, Riley," the newcomer called out, his voice carrying the easy familiarity of a regular customer. He took a seat at the far end of the bar, clearly intent on nothing more than his usual nightcap, before heading home to an empty apartment and memories that sometimes felt more real than the present. Diesel moved quickly, intercepting the man before he could settle into his chosen seat. "Private party tonight, old-timer," he announced, his tone carrying just enough menace to make his meaning clear. "Maybe find somewhere else to drink." His bulk blocked the exit, making his suggestion feel more like a command backed by the implicit threat of violence. The situation had evolved beyond simple harassment into something approaching hostage-taking, with an innocent bystander now trapped in the middle of whatever the 3 men had planned. Riley's calculations shifted accordingly, factoring in the need to protect someone who had no training, no awareness of what was really happening, and no ability to defend himself if violence erupted. What would you do if you walked into this situation? Would you try to help or get out as fast as possible? Let me know in the comments below. Viper stood slowly, his chair pushing back with a squeal that sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard. The movement was theatrical, designed to draw attention and establish dominance through pure physical presence. "See what you've done now?" he asked Riley, his voice carrying mock disappointment. "Got an innocent old man caught up in something that's none of his business." "That's on you, sweetheart." The psychological manipulation was textbook, creating artificial responsibility for consequences that belonged entirely to the aggressors. Riley had seen the technique used before, the way predators shifted blame to their victims as justification for escalating violence. It was a classic pattern that revealed more about the perpetrator's mindset than their actual intentions. "Let him leave," Riley said, her voice maintaining its professional calm despite the rising stakes. "He's not part of whatever this is supposed to be." She kept her hands visible on the bar surface, projecting non-threatening body language while internally calculating distances, angles, and the optimal sequence of movements should diplomacy fail. Knox had moved to capture better angles of the unfolding drama, his phone's camera switching between participants as he provided running commentary for his growing online audience. The viewer count continued climbing as word spread through social media channels that something significant was happening. Comments demanded more aggressive action. Virtual voices calling for violence from the safety of their anonymous screens. "Here's what's going to happen," Viper announced, his voice carrying the tone of someone accustomed to having his declarations become reality through force of will. "Old man's going to sit right there and watch while you and I discuss your customer service skills. Maybe learn something about respect and appreciation." The threat was no longer implicit. The danger to both Riley and the unwitting patron clear to anyone paying attention. The three men had moved beyond intimidation into the realm of actual criminal behavior, crossing lines that would bring serious legal consequences if their actions were ever reported. Their confidence suggested they had no intention of leaving witnesses capable of providing testimony. Riley's hand remained near the salt shaker, her body language suggesting casual conversation, while her mind ran through tactical assessments at lightning speed. The patron represented a complication that changed every calculation, transforming a personal confrontation into a protection scenario with vastly different parameters. Everything she had learned about controlled violence, about minimal necessary force, about the legal and moral obligations that came with superior training, focused into crystalline clarity. Viper reached across the bar, his intentions clear in the predatory smile that spread across his features. "Time for a closer look at what we're working with," he said, his hand moving toward Riley's shirt collar with the casual entitlement of someone who had never faced meaningful resistance. The moment stretched like a held breath, teetering on the edge of irrevocable action. Riley's eyes met his across the narrow space of the bar top, and for just an instant, Viper caught a glimpse of something that made his hand hesitate. Not fear, not submission, but the kind of cold assessment that belonged to someone who had looked death in the face and emerged victorious. Their cognition lasted only a heartbeat before being dismissed as impossible, the cognitive dissonance too great for his worldview to accommodate. The fabric of Riley's shirt bunched under Viper's grip as he prepared to tear away the barrier between himself and his objective. Knox positioned his phone to capture the moment, the online audience reaching fever pitch as they sensed the climax approaching. Diesel blocked the patron's potential escape route, ensuring their evening's entertainment would proceed without interruption. Riley's voice cut through the tension like a blade. 3 seconds to let go. The words carried no anger, no fear, just the matter-of-fact tone of someone stating an observable fact. Her hand shifted position slightly, fingers finding perfect purchase on the salt shaker's textured surface. Viper's laughed through the establishment, his grip tightening rather than releasing. "Or what, sweetheart? You going to call the police? Scream for help?" His confidence remained absolute, built in years of encountering no meaningful resistance to his appetites. The possibility that this situation might be different hadn't penetrated his consciousness. "One," Riley said, her voice maintaining the same deadly calm. The salt shaker moved fractionally closer to her dominant hand, the motion so subtle that none of the three men registered its significance. Her breathing remained controlled, her posture balanced, every aspect of her presentation suggesting someone preparing for action rather than pleading for mercy. Knox leaned closer with his phone, sensing that whatever was about to happen would generate the kind of viral content that built careers and subscriber bases. The viewer count had climbed past 5,000, with comments flooding the screen faster than human eyes could follow. The digital audience's bloodlust had reached a crescendo, anonymous voices demanding violence and humiliation. "Two," Riley continued, her tone never wavering from its matter-of-fact delivery. Her eyes remained locked on Viper's face, watching for the micro-expressions that would telegraph his next move. Years of combat experience had taught her to read the subtle tells that preceded violence, the involuntary signals that gave away an opponent's intentions. Viper's grip shifted as he prepared to tear the fabric, his other hand moving to steady himself against the bar. The position left him momentarily off balance, his weight committed to the forward motion that would expose Riley to his associates and their online audience. His smile widened as he savored the moment of anticipated victory. The heavy oak door chimed again as another figure entered the establishment, but the sound was lost in the building tension that filled the air like electricity before a storm. Riley Shand found its final position on the salt shaker as she prepared to demonstrate why some people chose careers that required them to be willing to die for others and what that choice revealed about their capacity for violence when properly motivated. 3. The word hung in the air for a heartbeat. That felt like eternity before Viper's hand jerked forward, fabric tearing with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. The cotton shirt ripped along the shoulder seam, exposing pale skin that should have revealed vulnerability. Instead, what emerged from beneath the torn material was something that changed the entire atmosphere of the room in an instant. Ink, dark, precise, unmistakable. The intricate design of an Army Special Forces unit patch spread across Riley's left shoulder, the crossed arrows and distinctive insignia rendered with the kind of artistic detail that spoke of professional work and personal significance. The tattoo wasn't decorative. It was a declaration, a mark earned through trials that most people couldn't imagine surviving. The recognition hit Knox first, his phone wavering as the implications registered. He had cousins who served, had heard enough stories to understand what that particular symbol represented. The Special Forces patch wasn't something worn casually or earned through weekend warrior fantasies. It marked someone who had undergone training that broke most candidates, who had operated in environments where failure meant death for entire teams. Diesel's aggressive posture faltered as his eyes processed the revealed artwork. The brass knuckles suddenly felt inadequate, childish even, compared to what that tattoo implied about its bearer's capabilities. His hand moved away from the weapon without conscious thought, some primitive survival instinct warning him that the situation had shifted dramatically beyond his understanding. Viper's grip remained locked on the torn fabric, his mind struggling to reconcile the professional bartender he thought he was intimidating with the soldier the tattoo revealed her to be. The cognitive dissonance created a moment of paralysis, his worldview requiring fundamental adjustment to accommodate this new information. The confident predator found himself suddenly uncertain about his position in the food chain. Riley's demeanor transformed like a switch being thrown. The polite service worker vanished, replaced by something that moved with lethal precision and spoke with absolute authority. Her voice, when it came, carried the command presence that had once directed operations where hesitation measured in milliseconds could determine who went home and who didn't. "Release me now," she stated. The words carrying no negotiation, no pleading, just the flat certainty of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Her hand closed around the salt shaker with practiced ease. The improvised weapon positioned for maximum effectiveness against the radial nerve cluster in Viper's extended arm. The technique was textbook, designed for immediate incapacitation without permanent damage. The pressure point strike happened faster than untrained eyes could follow. Riley's thumb found the precise location where nerve pathways converged near Viper's wrist, applying focused pressure with the salt shaker's textured surface. The effect was immediate and decisive. Viper's hand opened involuntarily as his nervous system delivered overwhelming pain signals, his grip on her shirt releasing as his arm went temporarily numb. The massive biker staggered backward, his face contorting with shock and confusion. The pain was unlike anything he had experienced. Not the dull ache of bar fight injuries, but the sharp, overwhelming sensation of his own nervous system being turned against him. His hand dangled uselessly at his sides. He tried to comprehend how someone half his size had rendered him helpless without apparent effort. "Jesus Christ," Knox whispered, his phone forgotten as the implications of what he had just witnessed sank in. The live stream continued broadcasting to thousands of viewers who were now witnessing something far different than the promised violence against a helpless victim. Comments erupted in confusion and disbelief as the narrative they expected was completely inverted. Riley stepped back from the bar, her movements revealing the controlled grace of someone whose body had been trained as a weapon. Every gesture was economical, purposeful, designed for maximum efficiency with minimum wasted motion. The torn shirt hung loosely from her frame, the exposed tattoo catching the bar's dim lighting like a badge of honor, earned through trials her current opponents couldn't imagine. The older patron, still trapped near the blocked exit, stared in amazement at the sudden reversal of fortune. His military service had been decades ago and in a different era, but he recognized the bearing of someone who had served in elite units. The way she moved, the way she assessed threats, the calm professionalism in the face of violence, all spoke to training that went far beyond basic military service. Diesel made the mistake of reaching for his brass knuckles, the weapon clearing his belt before Riley's attention focused on him like a laser sight. Her stance shifted slightly, weight redistributing in a way that suggested someone preparing to close distance rapidly. The implied threat in her posture was unmistakable to anyone with combat experience. "I wouldn't," she advised, her tone carrying the patient authority of someone explaining obvious facts to a slow student. You're already in enough trouble without adding weapons charges to the list. The legal knowledge in her warning suggested someone familiar with the justice system from the enforcement side rather than as a defendant. Knox's live stream had attracted more viewers as word spread through social media that something extraordinary was happening. The comment section exploded with questions about the woman's identity, her background, her training. Hashtags began trending as the video was shared across platforms, creating a digital footprint that would outlast the physical confrontation by years. The back office door opened with a soft creak, revealing a figure that immediately commanded attention despite his unremarkable appearance. Murphy himself emerged from the shadows. A man in his 60s whose weathered face bore the kind of scars that came from bullets rather than bar fights. His eyes took in the scene with the quick assessment of someone who had dealt with violence professionally for most of his adult life. "Evening, Sergeant," Murphy said, his voice carrying casual familiarity that hit the room like a thunderbolt. The title wasn't guesswork, it was recognition, one veteran acknowledging another with the respect earned through shared sacrifice. His presence instantly shifted the dynamic again, revealing that Riley wasn't as isolated as the three bikers had assumed. Viper's eyes darted between Riley and Murphy, his tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. What had seemed like an easy target in an isolated location was revealing itself to be something far more complex. The bar wasn't neutral territory. It was hostile ground controlled by people with training and experience that made his gang's street credentials irrelevant. "Sir," Riley acknowledged, her tone carrying the automatic respect of someone who understood military hierarchy. The exchange was brief, but revealed layers of relationship that the three intruders had never suspected. This wasn't a random bartender working alone. This was someone connected to networks that extended far beyond the confines of a neighborhood drinking establishment. Knox's phone captured every word, transmitting the conversation to an audience that had grown beyond anything he had ever achieved before. The viewer count climbed past 10,000 as the video was shared across military forums, social media groups, and news aggregators. The story was writing itself in real time, creating the kind of viral content that defined careers and destroyed reputations. "These gentlemen were just leaving," Riley stated, her words carrying the finality of someone accustomed to having her decisions respected without argument. She maintained visual contact with all three men while positioning herself to respond to movement from any direction. The tactical awareness was automatic, instinctive, the product of training that had become second nature. Diesel's hand moved away from his weapon as the reality of their situation finally penetrated his alcohol-clouded judgment. They weren't dealing with an isolated victim. They were facing someone who could probably kill all three of them before they understood what was happening. The brass knuckles felt like children's toys compared to what her training implied about her capabilities. Viper clutched his still numb arm against his chest, his face pale with shock and grudging recognition. The pain was already subsiding, but the psychological impact would last much longer. He had built his reputation on the ability to intimidate through size and aggression, but those tools were useless against someone who understood violence at a level he had never imagined. "This isn't over," he managed, his voice lacking the conviction that had characterized his earlier threats. The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. The empty bluster of someone trying to salvage dignity from a situation that had exposed his fundamental weakness. His reputation among his followers would never recover from this public humiliation. Riley's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she was filing the threat away for future reference. "Yes, it is," she replied with quiet certainty. "You're banned from this establishment permanently. If your turn, I'll consider it criminal trespass and respond accordingly." The legal precision of her language suggested someone familiar with the procedures that would follow any future confrontation. Knox had lowered his phone slightly, but continued recording as the three men began their retreat toward the exit. The live stream audience watched in fascination as the promised violence dissolved into humiliating defeat for the aggressors. Comments demanded explanations, background information, anything that might help them understand what they had just witnessed. The older patron moved carefully out of Diesel's path as the three men shuffled toward the door. His relief was palpable, but mixed with obvious admiration for the young woman who had transformed a dangerous situation into a decisive victory without throwing a single punch. The professional competence was unlike anything he had seen since his own military service decades earlier. Murphy moved behind the bar, pulling out a first aid kit and setting it within easy reach. His actions suggested this wasn't the first time the establishment had dealt with violence, though probably not usually resolved so efficiently. The casual way he handled the aftermath spoke to experience managing situations where things went beyond verbal confrontation. "Need anything checked?" Murphy asked Riley, his tone carrying paternal concern rather than professional worry. The question revealed their relationship extended beyond simple employer and employee, suggesting connections that ran deeper than casual acquaintance. His protective instincts were obvious but respectful of her capabilities. Riley shook her head, testing the range of motion in her shoulder, where the shirt had torn. The fabric damage was minimal, easily repaired or replaced, but the symbolic significance was greater. The forced revelation of her tattoo had changed how everyone in the room perceived her, stripping away the carefully maintained anonymity she had cultivated since leaving active duty. The three bikers reached the exit, their retreat lacking any of the swagger that had characterized their entrance. Knox pocketed his phone as they stepped into the parking lot, but not before the automatic backup function uploaded the entire confrontation to cloud storage systems that would preserve it indefinitely. The digital permanence of their humiliation would outlast any physical consequences. Outside, the sound of motorcycle engines starting up provided a soundtrack to their departure. The aggressive revving that had announced their arrival was replaced by the subdued rumble of men eager to distance themselves from a situation that had gone catastrophically wrong. The mechanical voices of their machinists seemed to mock their earlier confidence. Riley pulled the torn edges of her shirt together, temporarily concealing the tattoo that had changed everything. The image was beyond simple repair, but she had spare clothing in the back office for situations that required quick changes. The practical considerations of maintaining her appearance for the remainder of her shift took precedence over dwelling on what had just occurred. The older patron approached the bar cautiously, his eyes still wide with amazement at what he had witnessed. "Can I buy you a drink?" he asked, his voice carrying the respect of one veteran acknowledging another's service. The offer was clearly meant as tributera rather than casual social interaction, recognition of sacrifices that deserved acknowledgement. "Coffee would be appreciated," Riley replied, her demeanor returning to something approaching normal professional courtesy. The adrenaline was already beginning to fade, leaving behind the familiar mixture of relief and residual alertness that followed any use of force, however minimal. Her body remained ready for additional threats, while her mind processed the implications of what had just happened. Murphy set up the coffee maker with practiced efficiency, his movements revealing the automatic hospitality that kept regular customers returning despite the establishment's rough reputation. The ritual of preparation provided a moment of normalcy after the violent disruption, a return to the mundane activities that defined most human interaction. Knox's phone, forgotten in his jacket pocket, continued its automatic functions. The live stream had ended when he lowered the device, but not before the entire confrontation was captured and transmitted to cloud servers that would preserve it indefinitely. The backup systems operated beyond his knowledge or control, creating digital permanence for events he might prefer to forget. The bar's atmosphere slowly returned to normal as the remaining patrons processed what they had witnessed. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, mixing admiration for Riley's competence with speculation about her background and training. The story would grow in the telling, becoming part of the establishment's folklore and her personal legend. Riley accepted the coffee with quiet gratitude, her hands steady despite everything that had just occurred. The warm ceramic provided tactile comfort as she mentally reviewed the incident for any details that might require attention. The professional debrief was automatic, instinctive, the product of training that emphasized learning from every engagement. Murphy leaned against the back counter, his position providing clear sightlines to both entrances, while appearing casual to untrained observers. "Any chance those boys might come back tonight?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was prepared for either answer. The question revealed experience with grudges and retaliation that extended beyond simple bar fights. "No," Riley replied with quiet certainty. "They'll need time to process what happened before they make any decisions about next steps." Her assessment was based on years of experience reading human behavior under stress, understanding how people responded to having their fundamental assumptions challenged so dramatically. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air, growing louder. Ace emergency vehicles navigated the empty streets toward their location. Someone had called 911 during the confrontation, either a concerned patron or a neighbor who had heard the commotion. The police response was automatic, inevitable, regardless of how the situation had been resolved. Riley straightened as the sirens grew closer, her expression shifting to accommodate the bureaucratic complexity that would follow any incident involving physical force. The paperwork would be extensive, the questions repetitive, the entire process designed to document everything for legal protection and administrative oversight. Her military background would help navigate the procedures, but wouldn't eliminate them entirely. Murphy moved to unlock the front door, preparing for the arrival of officers who would need to assess the scene and take statements from everyone present. His cooperation was practiced. The response of someone who understood that full transparency served everyone's interests better than attempts at concealment or minimization. The older patron finished his drink quickly, clearly hoping to avoid involvement in the official investigation that was about to begin. His status as an innocent bystander wouldn't protect him from hours of questioning if their responding officers decided his testimony was relevant to their report. The prospect of dealing with law enforcement bureaucracy was daunting for someone who simply wanted a quiet nightcap. Red and blue lights painted the bar's windows as the first patrol car arrived, followed quickly by a second unit that parked to block potential escape routes. The officers who emerged moved with the cautious professionalism of people responding to a reported assault, their hands resting near their weapons as they assessed the scene for ongoing threats. Riley sat down her coffee and moved toward the center of the room, positioning herself where the responding officers could see her clearly while keeping her hands visible and her posture non-threatening. The automatic compliance was ingrained, the product of training that emphasized cooperation with law enforcement, even when such cooperation was inconvenient or time-consuming. The lead officer entered with weapon drawn but lowered, his eyes sweeping the establishment for signs of violence or ongoing danger. Finding only a calm bartender, an elderly patron, and a bar owner who appeared completely relaxed, his tactical alertness decreased slightly while his investigative focus increased. The scene didn't match the emergency call they had received. "We got a report of an assault in progress," the officer announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Everyone needs to stay exactly where they are while we figure out what happened here." The command was automatic, designed to preserve the scene until they could determine whether a crime had actually occurred. Riley nodded her understanding, her compliance immediate and complete. The interaction would be straightforward as long as everyone cooperated with the investigation and provided honest testimony about what had transpired. The truth would support her actions, but the process of establishing that truth would consume several hours of everyone's time. Murphy produced the establishment's licensing documentation without being asked, his preparation revealing experience with law enforcement procedures. The paperwork was current and complete, eliminating one potential complication from the investigation. His cooperation extended beyond simple compliance to active assistance with the officer's administrative requirements. Outside, Knox sat on his motorcycle in the parking lot of a convenience store 3 blocks away, staring at his phone screen in disbelief. The notification showed that his live stream had been automatically backed up to cloud storage, preserving every moment of their humiliating defeat for posterity. The digital evidence of their failure would be impossible to erase. Creating permanent documentation of the Night Viper gang tried to intimidate the wrong person. The uploaded video was already beginning its viral journey across social media platforms, shared and reshared by viewers who recognized the significance of what they had witnessed. Within hours, it would reach military forums where veterans would identify Riley's unit patch and speculate about her service record. The story would grow beyond the confines of a single bar fight to become something larger and more meaningful. Back inside the establishment, Riley prepared for the lengthy process of providing her statement to investigating officers. The night was far from over, but the dangerous part had concluded with minimal violence and maximum effectiveness. Her military training had served its purpose once again, protecting innocent people while demonstrating that some individuals were far more dangerous than their appearance suggested. The tattoo that had changed everything remained hidden beneath her torn shirt, but its revelation had already set in motion consequences that would extend far beyond this single night. The digital age meant that nothing truly disappeared, that moments of truth were preserved forever in electronic memory that never forgot and rarely forgave. As the investigation began in earnest, Riley reflected on the price of maintaining her anonymity in a world where privacy was increasingly impossible. The choice to use force, even minimally and in self-defense, had consequences that extended beyond the immediate situation. Some secrets once revealed could never be hidden again. The careful balance she had maintained for 2 years was now shattered. Tomorrow, her face would be recognizable to thousands of strangers who had witnessed her tactical precision through Nox's livestream. Military forums would dissect her technique, speculate about her service record, and piece together fragments of past she had deliberately left behind. The quiet bartender identity that had provided sanctuary from memories of overseas operations would become impossible to sustain. She understood the ripple effects that would follow. Former colleagues might recognize her or might, so bringing unwanted attention from both friendly and hostile sources. Employers conducting background checks would discover the viral video, forcing conversations about capabilities she preferred to keep private. Even simple social interactions would carry the weight of others' assumptions about what she could do, what she had done, and what she might be willing to do again. The irony wasn't lost on her that protecting others had ultimately exposed herself. The very training that made her effective at neutralizing threats also made her memorable, distinctive, impossible to overlook once revealed. In trying to preserve one person's safety, she had sacrificed her own carefully constructed invisibility, trading anonymity for the responsibility that came with being known as someone who could handle violence with professional competence.